Sustain black reliefs. To sustain black reliefs, we have to sustain awareness of where and how we are quality as fact treatment nature, where we are value as nature / nature as value simultaneously. And the slash is equivalent to where and how we are a quality of diffusion, as temporary positive, as more and more forever nature, positive or negative to itself, being made, but per and as a value / value progression system that modern markets, positions, and value systems were forged tactically ulterior from, which would be alright if it was legitimately, and evidences of it are how they're using that as truths used to prevent the free speech of the truth that is true always, not denying exceptions, not denying exception nature. For example, that theater on off all locations that is criminal insidious natures, as frustrated reactions and reactions natures that already self-valued, that having been the same by other people with all identity, ground, location, stewardships, in relationship to where and how what it was is claimed practical and or legitimate and or law was is originally and still claimed so with recorded juxtaposed criminally foreign influence uses of criminally foreign influence sequence treatments, finite treatments, active, progressive, and identity's value / value progression / S treatments that were in collusion with the predicate acts delivery system method that forced that thing that is / S that slavery is. All that negative / negatives that can be used to reveal where and how what will only there is an identity of truth and of positive that is unlike other identities of positive, for example, as criminal insidious natures, of logic and of defenses of that logic, which are required originally and still to use premises treatments and sequence treatments and use where and how we are fact treatment nature, finite, active, and progressive, and as identity. Use people's names, time treatments. Again, too, where everyone's victims. Where time was used all too fast, too slow, to hurt people all kinds of ways, and to force, because they knew that everyone would have to stay being about positive, as criminal insidiousness natures. There was a predicate acts delivery system method, an organized crime method that is worse than war crimes, but it's simple. A predicate acts delivery system method. A criminal enterprise, unlike all other criminal enterprises, but it is simple as an archetypal criminal enterprise that is engineered by re-engineering the republic we inherited, thank God preserved, and or semi-preserved from ancient times, even though there was semi-ancient criminal re-engineering of ancient sciences and of defenses of that, and per a method that knew how to exploit that without having anybody allowing themselves or others to tell on it, per the only means to discern it. So everyone will forget things. Everyone took roles with criminally foreign influenced logic, also physical delusions, propagated juxtaposed relationships to this, what is actually recorded, relevant to immediate discernment /S. Discernment's needed in relationship to this needed, which is black reliefs, and where and how people are claiming themselves black only because that's how the syntax and the fact-sheeping nature, formally, privately, inter-sciences further, into private databases further, hundreds of nations shared police further, individually grouped together defenses of that, as identities of the laws, identities of opinions, of convictions, as identities of their own identities, other people's identities, uses with their judgment, with their reason, with their quality of fact-sheeping nature. Every single person, A through Z, nations A1 through Z, however many there are, uses of criminally foreign influence premises treatments, recorded effectively having been maintained self-valued roles, with exploitation of the phenomenon that this predicate acts delivery system method knew, could be increasingly easily exploited. Where and how nature itself, nature's identity, its identity of relationship to itself, relevant to what reveals its fruits and gifts, means from nowhere, means that weren't there before, or their loss. Again, this is our conversation tied to our fact-sheeping nature in reality, but it is using that is greater than and more finite than reality. And that reality /S is originally and still in the context, what is actually recorded evidence and capable of being used to explain American history is what was denied then and now. For example, in relationship to all identity of the ground, locations, areas, and states, maintained as criminal insidious natures of positive treatments, self-valued as victims, simultaneously that were in collusion with juxtaposed natures of overt negative value nature, progressions, action natures, like criminal insidious natures, like wrongdoers, like mass wrongdoing, predicate acts roles, with what was entrenched here, north and south, different surface nations involved with those types of slavery juxtaposed, tactically, methodically, for a long-term breaching method that effectively was made to make, they knew everyone was going to try to come out of it, but they wouldn't have any type of unity or union that couldn't be discerned coming and destroyed and or employed to role self-valued, keeping criminally foreign influenced uses of and acts of, opinions of, convictions of, and with all formal fact-sheeping nature, all private fact-sheeping nature, all opinion natures, and overt criminal enterprises, and again, hundreds of nations, and natures of police forms, and of military families and forms, and roles with them, where and how all fake identities of the law were our needing to hide from and to hurt, correlation nature, need to value hurt every single individual of correlation nature of our locations, areas, and states, so they don't connect what is actually connectable regarding how and why George Washington had to leave slavery entrenched in the North and in the South, but how he was able to force the North on paper, improperly though, to counter slavery while still in collusion with it. So the fake sides of the North and South were forced to be defended simultaneously, cyclically, distinctly, by the predicate X delivery system method and by our founding parents, by their plan. Where and how what was entrenched cyclically, distinctly, cyclically on the surface was specifically for fact treatment nature roles, keeping how that with what it were kept effectively, how cyclically non-distinctly they were victims of the same thing from being discerned, including simultaneously that's the same phenomenon with the other nations. They had/have their histories stolen in their face, as we have ours stolen in our face. They were made to fight this invisible enemy. They were backed into styles of fighting that required defenses of themselves, which required defenses of counters to criminal insidiousness natures of things and of people and of acts and of methods that were effectively maintained only capable of being that, so incapable of countering the real causes of it and investing themselves and valuing having been invested all opinions and conviction natures formal and other and semi-formal, formal referring to the branches of government and the phenomenal distinctions: executive branch, judicial branch, and the legislative branch. Hostage, just like in every other nation, and per what sickly distinctly hurts every modern nation, as what again effectively maintains reactions to it only capable of blaming other things, others themselves, and valuing it having been, valuing a theater positive, a theater integrity, only having been allowed to be heard as the voice of the law and what is true, how we properly should defend ourselves. So we have, through time, what new, what is manifest, Washington, D.C., and World Trade Center, tied to our campuses of each age and nature. Before that was so, it was already from off those locations, from off all private database relationships simultaneously, cyclically, distinctly too, intercities, intra-cities, and per a method that keeps each age of correlation nature, each position of it, no matter how successful or anything. It could be something more powerful than a king, queen, with the same agenda, and a pharaoh together. They still, if they're above all locations, areas, and states criminally foreign influence, they are forced to entertain styles of human fact treatment nature, styles of sciences, uses of the names of the identities of the sciences, like English, like math. As what can't defend that and afford discerned all that is actually capable of being discerned. Where and how what is actually recorded is where and how the sciences share an identity. /S. One identity of value / value progression that is becoming more and more of itself, unceasingly and only increasingly. And in relationship to Earth, distinct and non-distinct in simultaneous relationship to the rest of space nature. It is the phenomenon of where and how one identity of value / value progression can make more of itself as increasing itself's identity of value an identity of relationship to itself that is positive only. Well, how did it? Genesis is about one identity of generation, a particular identity of generation. And is the generation is one identity of volume, its identity of relationship to itself. And the value of that is only increasing. And this one identity of volume is juxtaposed with all others. Even something that can be made up has what is coming to, from, as, with, and for its value. As a perfect system that is making more of its perfect identity and of its increasingly positive to itself forever nature more and more made here, or us as temporary / lasting forever nature forced from here, least the least of IDs. And so it can continue. See, Earth has a concentrated value that humanity was separated from the system of. So even though we are only one little species, we are able to so long ignore the identity of evolution's identity of value / value progression system and its ties to our human fact-checking nature, syntax nature, and its ties to the negative value nature progression acts and natures associated with all locations of the earth and of our species identity of volume / S, individuals, grouped, and the species identity of volume. 3 invisible but still discernible, distinct, non-distinct, and simultaneous relationships to this identity of value progression system perfect. It's one thing to forsake the perfect world, but it's something else to do it in ways that are in collusion with which prevents mandated law outside of the law. Law's interbranch locations. Each individual of each branch of government, originally and still, were maintained victims that needed to react to other victims where everyone was all predators together, sickly distinctly fighting in defense against what they didn't know how to, what they didn't understand the motivations of, the methods of, the means of. It was sophistication here since before our founding parents, with no free speech and with the impositions they had having to hide their roles with what actually gave them the courage in the theater to do the Boston Tea Party, for example. To pretend to be about caring about American history, but while roles, breaching screen, preventing worse than obfuscating American history, while simultaneously preventing offensively it from being realized too, by valuing through other motivations for it, bonded, but valuing correlation nature never having been, for the same reasons. They keep all formal positions, all sciences, as victims, as abridged constitution, identity of the ground, conjunctions to that. Both correlative and coordinating conjunctions. As all parts of English are in demonstration of the identity of correlation nature, being a trinity, inherent, active, and progressive, but also as an identity of value progression, as its identity of relationship to itself, and as the only increasing value of that, invisible but still discernible. English and the languages were revealed to the ancients about the invisible but still discernible, that which can be juxtaposed by the mind, that can discern the difference between something that is true always and not denying exceptions in exception nature. And the study of that reveals that it has a relationship, not just to how we are individuals grouped in together as three identities of volume as value, as nature, / nature as value, but as a trinity of relationship to itself. Again, it's itself as an identity of volume, inseparable from all others, because all the juxtaposed, concentrated identities of value / value progression, they are manifest with this one identity of volume and its identity of relationship to itself, and the value of that only increasing, inseparable from us. But the value of that, it can be positive or negative. Where and how we can't help but be temporary positive. So the ancients would demonstrably teach that, and how the difference between temporary positive as criminal insidious natures of positive that can't be legalized, but they were legalized per a predicate acts delivery system method, per roles with that, which was roles with an archetypal criminal enterprise. So, 10. So space, one identity is makes bigger than space. And space is either too small or too big. Where and how we have potential is not our potential. See, we have to realize how we were fit to space locations invested as fact treatment nature, that were set up specifically to keep the all identity of the ground locations roles with one shared self-valued, even if not discerned how self-valued method and nature of organized crime as a predicate acts delivery system method, worse than war crimes against everybody. So now this has job sites, this has campuses, and had them through administrations, through the transition from Alca to Rico. Had a whole bunch of other nations and their family members relying on value systems, jobs, fact treatment nature of relationships, positive and negative treatments. Simultaneously roles with what keeps exceptions in exception nature exploited, even set up to exploit, but through our own, and through their own there. And see, contrast is maintained self-value, and having been self-valued in ways that can't afford to defend that, and to have all that English would reveal, to have be taught with and as discerned. Not one has learned. So, for example, we must understand how and why alpha is the name in alphabet. They have narratives like alpha male and stuff like that. Where and how we must understand originally and still the victims interbranched in the three branches of government, all tied to it. Private, overt criminal enterprises, hundreds of nations. They were roles with all that was not complicated, just extensive and overtly sick. And if you study what it was true always as, such as it was overtly sick, as such as it was simultaneously insidiously sick, and that doesn't deny exceptions in exception nature. If you say it's racism, that's true always, not denying exceptions. You can't stack that. As complicated things it is, that is true always, because there's That's not what it was. It was against everyone. People were forced to have roles with fake narratives put in every single database, tied to every single person, every single location, area in the state, since before we were America. Since before those countries involved with their summary convictions and opinions teach about, they say, oh, well, it's complicated, so we'll just say, England colonized us. England was extended to it as an identity that was bigger than itself, herself. The masculine and the feminine, we'll get into that, has to do with the Alpha and Omega, has to do with the Trinity. It goes with the quality of diffusion. It goes with where, how all exceptions in exception nature have a conjunction to, while as all truths. There is one identity of truth that does not deny exceptions. It is exceptions at the same time. See, we have that identity of truth, valued never having been remembered, in charge. Science, used for science. It is science. What we could agree, as the ancients demonstrably agreed, there is one scientific value. They have to be able to explain things in relationship to, or your short words become contaminated, and more the long words and active words. And that's the identity that is at least the body of forever, while being more finite than the finite, which is already more finite than we could handle, that we have complete, than we can handle. I want to say in our control, because its nature has control, and we could tap into it by using its system. And it's also what is greater, what is bigger than us, that we can't handle. But it is itself, while it is itself distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously here. It is also its identity of relationship to itself, and the value of that only increasing here, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously. So there is the phenomenon of the invisible but still discernible, being and having been here in ways that were effectively maintained, obfuscated, but through other motivations. For example, there is an identity. There is an actual identity of relativity that properly, honestly spoken for, scientists can reveal on paper, and just here as fact, cheap in nature. So, this is a long video, but in other words, we need to deal with the recorded juxtaposed levels of, criminally foreign influence, proofs of criminally foreign influence premises treatments, natures of things, and of systems manipulations. All victim predators, all victims that were effectively breaching method maintained, blaming other things, others themselves, and then valuing that. They made real bad knaves with nursing homes throughout the country since before the coronavirus. Now this is where they have legal treatments, where they have lawyers and the branches of government as evidence in collusion. Thank God there are great positives that can be revealed by the great negatives that Jim Crow laws were about. But you have to use what is true always, not denying exceptions in exception nature. It was about criminally foreign influence premises treatments usage and uses of those identities doing that by a breaching method that is maintained through criminal foreign influences, but it's fluent through our nations. It maintains the outcome here and there. So when they fight, if one people start trying to unferret this, it unferrets fact-cheating nature styles relied upon by nations contrasting themselves and caring about themselves both ways simultaneously in collusion with criminal insidious natures of positive treatments, of negative treatments where we are fact-cheating nature. So, but humanity wants and has way more means to this. All we have to do is all admit it. It is recorded the world over how the means to infrastructure to afford everything is contained by that which came from semi-ancient times. And everyone just ignored because they had to follow positive, because things weren't in control, they're in their control, because that's what everyone was told. That's why it is necessary to reveal the proofs of the recorded criminally foreign influence database relationships. Science is abridged further for the victim roles and how victim predator and where victim predator pretended breaching screening against the Constitution abridged. That needs to pretend that what the founding parents wanted us to say. There comes time to admit the roots of a criminally foreign influenced union in collusion with the predicate acts delivery system method leveraged against each identity of the human identity of volume. And we here, as Americans, have a plan to leak down and to trickle sideways and to make sure that keeps happening so we know that that owed reliefs are revealed, means to them. You know, better than just free. And this is in freedom in relationship to the identity of relativity that is actual. So we have the science of relativity. The theory of relativity. And we have the theory of volume theory and uses of them for sequence shifts. Uses of Black Lives Matter for sequence shifts that are connected to predicate acts rules, that are fact-cheating nature oriented. But they were and are already having been extended to roles with locations worst predicate acts in natures, and roles keeping that an oncoming stream in collusion with all associated private, interbranch, overt criminal enterprises, other natures in collusion per one method that has itself self-valued. This archetypal criminal enterprise self-valued. The same way your soul has this fact-cheating nature system self-valued that we are fact-cheating nature systems forced all ulterior from. And while everyone is using that, which is true, as reality, but they're using it to prevent how the exceptions in exception nature are being denied. That which is the identity that can speak for the surface values of the Constitution without staying in inclusion and valuing having been inclusion in everyone with the criminally foreign influenced, entrenched, criminal foreign influences, criminally foreign influenced premises treatment specifically, and specifically because of the defenses of that, styles of fact-cheaping nature that are a vast array in collusion against every single individual who wants to use logic with no criminal foreign influences, and that is using the phenomenon of that identity of truth that is also true as all exceptions and all exception matrix. That's the one that inventions work or not in relationship to. They are further positive or not in relationship to it. See, what is actually recorded simultaneously? Value / value progression's value is other than what is pretended by what they call the intelligence community. This is per a breaching method that maintains hundreds of nations reliant upon themselves and other nations having been knaves sickly distinctly. And they were all hurt sickly distinctly to keep them sickly distinctly and non-distinctly. Sickly distinctly blaming other things other than themselves. Where and how their short words were prevented. And they are where everyone's forced to pretend other. So they summarize history by saying that England colonized us. It is less complicated, only just a little bit more extensive to tell. That and how it was entrenched there too. It was entrenched as a system fluent through our nations. It knew that nations bonded individuals, groups, and complete unities like of nations and as species identity of volume. Other from the system that would have to self-value roles, which that was so sick overtly and slash insidiously, while it was fake positive overtly and insidiously, in collusion with all locations, areas, states before our founding parents were even born. Already had Native Americans, colonists, needing to counter things were far short of having means to, but needing to do it anyway. So everyone had to be very everyone had to be, everyone couldn't defend itself and afford, the quality of sophistication and the time to have appreciated what education they were separated from. So they sustained tactical criminal re-engineering of every single modern nation's education. No matter who had it the worst, the least worst, this is internations. This is to keep the nations bonded tactical terror from how we are bonded by this system that we're supposed to, that is inseparable from our quality of fact-cheaping nature, where we don't have control of it but one way, which is way/s, individual grouped and together. And it's one identity of volume/s. The study of it, understanding it, is how you can know how to cause evolution's fruits and gifts. See, there are physical delusions, and there are criminally foreign influence statutes, precedents. For example, regarding the piping and with the water throughout America, not just because of lead in the past, See, we are on value progression systems that were designed by a breaching method that was fake positive in collusion with the overtly sick and with the simultaneously sick. Crazy, crazy bad evil. Groups' interests, methods, motivations, nature's needs, sequence, treatments, identity treatments with all locations. You missed how to heal that because it was easily. You have to be able to look at where and how the worst things, especially together, they show where and how. They show easiest where and how a predicate acts delivery system method can be discerned. And that simultaneously means to discern what can be used as a fact treatment nature, not just by all the modern nations at once, to force injunctive reliefs to all locations, areas, and states of the entire species identity or volume, to force to reveal simultaneously, known and understood how we're going to afford a nature of and methods of infrastructure and of means to them that can only be afforded if we use that identity that is the world that is more size than we could fathom being able to use at once. And it is simultaneously that same identity where and how we can't fathom having enough space at once. It is both those identities at once. It is where what is too hot, like a burning fire, and what is too cold, it's like a burning fire in a living room, where outside it is below zero, where they conspire to make the warmth, where more and more of the perfect world is made. Here many pray, but way denied. Yet all around them lie, pretended other. So we have to address how all identity of the ground locations are used by a predicate acts delivery system method. And we have to use the evidences of how the lawyers and how the identities of the law were in collusion, fabricating audio and video, in collusion with databases, as victims, maintain needing to self-value roles within as that, per how all identity of the ground locations keeps them roles with that, needing to hide that by needing to simultaneously as what needs to keep the identity grounds used intercities to hide worse than interstates, worse than just internations, effectively maintained libel aggression, cover up nature's needs and styles manifest as all database stewards relationships to ourselves and to themselves, further and further to all identity ground locations. See, we have to be able to see, this shows how investigators and vetting and perception is maintained outside of interbranch locations, outside of campuses. Collusion with that which maintains on and off those locations uses of illusion stacking with databases, which is simultaneously evil pretending other styles, stacking, styles of logic that can't afford people the means to counter sequence shifts, tied illusions, and uses of online policing and uses of their interbranch locations to fabricate audio and video with other nations, and their uses of needing to pretend other or we get penalized by sanctions and things like that, and by our ability to not be able to use sanctions as like peaceful means to counter things overtly sick specifically for that. This is multi-front against sophistication, and sophistication's claimed anyway. So our founding parents want us to understand that the time was then and now for us to claim the Union as it was is actually recorded, criminally foreign influenced, and used remotely, and to see what can't admit that, and how, and why. So, we can use pantheism as a means to just claim reliefs. We can make hundreds of nations. We'll agree at once. If we're going to do this at once, we're going to agree all kinds of things aren't going to be happening at once that are bad. So we could put so we could afford to change the nature of everything. See, everything was conformed to what if entertained simultaneously, that increasingly simultaneously prevents defenses of what keeps all locations, areas, states, and sciences criminally foreign influenced and pretending other. Keeps means to counter that incapable of being fathomed or realized. The lie about who speaks with practical reason, to use Kant's phrase, Immanuel Kant, properly, who speaks with integrity properly, who speaks for the law properly. When they make opinions about what forced Jim Crow laws, you've never heard anyone speak about that properly. A predicate acts delivery system method, a human fact-cheating nature breaching method, a human syntax nature breaching method that was simultaneously pretending to be other, caused it. And all were roles with it, hiding the lie progressions of that. Each of the sciences stayed abridged, and they lie about that to themselves and to others. And the only reason that has stayed the outcome is because we have all kinds of rules, crimes, methods, and natures. So they prevent mandated law. They keep telling people, they have the people who answer the phones directed to believe illusions they've been pretending into databases, where the fact-cheating nature-oriented predicate acts are where our leaders have collusion with all locations' worst natures of killers and of private and overt criminal enterprises, and rolls with their narratives while they are pretending to be able to speak for the law, while they are pretending to be able to speak for identities, any of them, let alone poor black people with that. But that is not to excuse the black nations that were roles with those tactics, with a whole bunch of other nations already grouped sick as identity laws that forced that here, there, since before our founding parents were born. Again, who had to hide their roles, just to make a unity with what you can't be unity with and afford the Constitution on a bridge simultaneously. When they say that George Washington owned slaves, they left out how he had to hide his roles with his actual motivations, told properly, and roles with the American Revolution and the fact-cheating nature, and his fact-cheating nature responses in relationship to the surface values of the Constitution. See, offensively, they have all experts needing to debate, have debates by leaving out types of evidences that are critical. You know, where and how slavery was left in the North and in the South, and where and how that was semi-countered, North and South, by what had to counter it as collusion with it. See, we're supposed to understand this. This is not complicated. But we have a nature of people fighting with passions and emotions that are also with the interbranch fabricating audio and video, because they are into, not just because of not just because they have insights into how there are jobs and things that are connected to all that manifest Washington D.C. and World Trade Center intercampuses tie. See, there are families that have roles with the intelligence community that have been exploiting that, which they were set up to exploit and use remotely. They have roles with all kinds of cases, investigations, investigators, and vetting identities. With what if we describe it, leaving out the other nations, how they kept and keep this, the roles? See, other nations had the adults involved with this, like prosecutors and judges. When they were kids, they had roles with it forced by people that were involved with the off campuses, connected on off campuses, predicate acts, sequence shifts, identity thefts, frauds, and database illusion stacking, and uses of that vertically and horizontally. So we have to have people be able to respond when people say, you know, they're making over allegations about people when they're having differences with the police. They're not, because the police have been using the right to lie per the rules of the other branches of government and all these other nations and overt criminal enterprises and private ones with fact-cheating nature-oriented predicate acts with them already, with cover-ups of that already, having been way worse. So, but humanity doesn't want to be this. And humanity, it brings evolution's fruits and gifts instantly. It brings us all, you know, it makes legislation like, it only feels like games, evolution science. We have space, unbelievable. Especially we can make whole areas, even if people don't want to leave, a lot of them make everyone nice. We're going to get on the same page. The only way you can do that is by observing evidences that are all the ones that are simultaneously forbid free speech, or they'll steal our identity. That's evidence itself. How they pretend people make conspiracy theories online and in locations behind our backs, not on paper, because if they try to do it on paper, they've been sequence shifting, fabricating audio and video. Now they've been doing it on wire crimes, mail crimes, fabricating police reports. There's also recorded how the various natures of courts, how the police forms are maintained criminally in foreign influence uses of those locations on a mass scale originally and still, already. And the same thing is in with other nations. The same thing was already in collusion with live aggression from there to every sick thing, every overtly insidious thing simultaneously. So this is about, it's alright people want to have opinions about black or white, which is simultaneous. See, but this is clear, how we are individual grouped in together. Three identities of volume that are distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously. Per an engineering, and as an engineering that is native pure. That has been prevented free speech. And everyone has been forced roles with natures of, within as natures of theater, pretending other, or you're prevented free speech. So we'll examine the mental health care, physical delusions, and natures of organized crime, and of worse than war crime roles. They have had worse than criminal incompetence alone regarding black lives. And as the black representatives of mental health care, inclusion against that which is necessary to have, which is, quality of fact, human nature capable of revealing the means to and the needs to injunctive reliefs for black people and for everyone immediately, especially for black people. We can't do that while simultaneously entertaining systems the way entertained. We have to be allowed to use the evidences that show. Fact treatment nature, uses, claims of black people by individuals, groups, even if everyone's all together. That's not the same thing as black people. So meanwhile, all the proofs of it are how black people are offensively prevented mandated law, offensively prevented education unless it's going to be in collusion with criminal and seditious natures of positive and of negative treatments, blamed on other causes, things themselves, while in collusion with them, all locations, further and further, in layers through other nature's motivations. We'll examine the identity thefts and frauds recorded that are relevant to emotions and passions, for example, being spoken about dishonestly by people, or because they're, in other words, they're using it for sequence shifts. They're using truths about how they feel about emotions and about things that happened in the past out of context, in collusion with that where they had a black and white originally, and still all identities of the law can't defend themselves in their logic and afford logic's actually inherent active and progressive means by correlation nature anywhere it's standing. This knew that would have to be self-valued, insidiously / overtly blamed on other things juxtaposed. So, right there. Real, but not reality. The complete or completed properly.